All right. So for the people who are watching this at home, this is Timm, and I am here in Washington, D.C. for a National Geographic Education Summit that I was invited to participate in. And that summit starts later this afternoon. And so I just could not resist the opportunity to teach a lesson and expose my students to what I'm getting the opportunity to experience. So here I'm standing in front of the reflecting pool. There's the Washington Monument, and I'm actually in front of the Lincoln Memorial. So really looking forward to seeing my students, anticipating what we're going to get to learn today about both the geography and the hydrology of Washington, D.C., as well as just learning a little bit of history. So it's always cool. Mr. Jungers, are you there by chance? Is that you, Mr. Jungers? Wave if you can hear me. Okay. Gary, can you hear me? I can't hear you. Huh, I still can't hear you. It's not muted on my end. My volume is all the way up. Is the microphone on your computer? Or it could possibly be muted within Zoom.
Okay, now can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay. I don't know why it switched to an external microphone, but.
How are you doing, Mr. Jungers?
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to this Zoom lesson.
Well, I'm pleased that you're there holding down the fort for me. So thank you for being there. Are you here both? You're here both days, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay, cool. So if anything spontaneously arises that's neat here in DC or at National Geographic once I start this summit, I don't want to impose too much on Gary there and Mr. Swanson and you guys, but I may amend the schedule from time to time if something really cool pops up. So, but as far as their lesson for their assignment is in Google Drive or in the Google Classroom for today, Mr. Jungers. After I get done, they'll have a worksheet to complete using Google Earth on their computers. And then what I had assigned for today, which was a book assignment,
Yes.
that can go ahead and be pushed to Friday.
All right.
The worksheets that I left in the folder, just leave them there.
All right.
Those I may have them do, or we may just completely punt and not do those. So.
Okay. Well, you'll be set for Monday, I think. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Yes.
Cool. So like it is hot and humid here. It's like yesterday was a high of 95.
Oh,
today, now fortunately I didn't fly in. I didn't get in until like 11 last night Eastern time. Today it's a little overcast and cooler, but it's still about 80 degrees and humid. So is it still raining there?
It was not this morning.
Oh man, it just downpoured yesterday.
Yes, it did. And it was 44 degrees this morning when I got it.
So everyone's scrambling for their sweaters and for their warm clothes, and I'm wishing I brought a tank top.
Oh, it's hard to know what to pack.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, bell will be ringing here shortly, but I'm just going to switch so the camera's not looking straight up my nose and maybe just face it towards the monument for the time being.
All right.
Mr. Swanson?
What's that, Nick?
You know where Mr. Swanson is?
Well, he's been in and out of here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where he is right now.
Okay.
You look in his office? Did Nick find you? Nick Tal came in looking for you. Yeah.
All right, here comes the herd. Hey, Mr. Swanson.
Hey, thanks for doing this.
Oh man, thank you.
I'm having
You
my
guys have-
sneak in too.
You guys have a lot going with homecoming and everything, so I appreciate your willingness to help me
Yep,
out here.
everyone say hi to Mr. Tim when you walk by.
Hi, Mr. Tim.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Oh, good. How are you? I
I'm
have.
great.
You guys
Hi.
stand in the back so we can sneak out. Okay. We got practice today.
I believe so, but you'll have to talk to Mr. Hush on that.
All right. Give me a pull.
And what class are you guys in right now?
Government.
In government? Awesome.
We'll sneak out after a little while, but
I don't know how this lesson is going to dovetail into government. I mean, it's completely unrelated.
yeah, unrelated.
Oh.
Okay, Tate, just go inside. Normal for Tim and take your seat.
Normal spots.
What do you mean normal spot? Go to the
You guys just stand in the back.
I'll put him in 8th grader.
I'm Mr. Tim.
Just gotta slide down.
Hi.
Oh God. Oh my God.
Didn't think I could see you through that screen, did you? We'll hit the hologram button and the 3D Mr. Tim will show up in the room in just a second.
What?
I think we're a few years away from that yet, but I think by the time I retire, it'll happen.
Is that the venue, Mr. Tim?
Good morning.
Mr. Tim, is that the Barthenian? Oh my God. That's crazy.
Everyone come on in, take a seat. And Mr. Jungers or Mr. Swanson, I'll depend upon you guys to tell me when you think everyone's in there and seated and ready to go.
All right, I'll tell you when everybody's here. Come on in.
Nobody's here in Washington.
That's a fancy green sweatband you got on there, Tate, up front.
Oh, he's FaceTiming us.
I hear it's really warm there, so you need that sweatband to absorb all that sweat from the warm weather, right?
Okay. Okay, Andrew. Take your spot. Okay, class. I believe we'll turn it over to Mr. Tim now.
All right, thanks a lot, Mr. Jungers. Give me just 10 seconds. There's an airplane flying overhead. It's probably providing a lot of background noise.
We can't hear the airplane. We can hear you.
All right. So we're going to start out class with the quiz. What monument am I standing in front of right now? Does anyone know? Mr. Jungers, you can call on someone to answer.
Okay, Ashland. What monument is he standing in front of? Yeah.
Anyone else got a guess? I'm standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Okay. As you guys know, I'm in Washington, D.C. for the next few days. I got invited to participate in a education summit that National Geographic is holding, which I'm really excited to be a part of. But yesterday, as I was driving to Omaha for my flight, I started thinking through my lesson plans and thinking about what I had planned for you 8th graders today. You guys had a book assignment that I had planned today dealing with weather stuff. And I know you're really disappointed, but I decided driving down to the airport, I could probably do better than that today. Being as I'm going to be in Washington, D.C., I really wanted to share part of my trip with you. And because all my meetings and stuff don't start till this afternoon, while I was on a layover in St. Louis for a couple hours sitting in the airport, I had access to internet, and so I created a new lesson for you. So today, instead of doing book work, which you're going to get to do tomorrow, I wanted to share with you guys Washington, D.C., and then as I'm doing so, I want you guys to make some similarities and differences comparisons in regards to the geography and to the hydrology of Washington, D.C. as it compares to Nebraska, and specifically the topic of flooding. You guys have been watching the news and been seeing, we've had a lot of flooding in Nebraska and along the Missouri River Basin and Mississippi River Basins, if you're looking at the grand scheme of our watershed over the past year. And I want to make some comparisons with DC and give you guys the opportunity to explore Washington, DC yourselves on your computers after I get done with this video, so that you guys might see that, we're not the only ones that face flooding challenges. In fact, DC is in a flood plain. It's half of DC it started out as a swamp, and it's taken a lot of human effort and work to be able to make it what it is today. So, but first off, let's just do a little sightseeing. So I'm going to change the camera here, and I'm going to show you what I'm facing as I'm talking to you, okay? I'm standing in front of something called the reflecting pool, okay? And there's a lot of movies that you've maybe seen. The one that comes to my mind, one that I loved as a kid, was Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump, there's a big rally, and he happens to be in Washington, D.C. to meet the president because he won the Medal of Honor. And that big rally is taking place in front of the Lincoln Memorial. And that Lincoln Memorial is on the west end of the reflecting pool. And on the opposite end of the reflecting pool, you can see the Washington Monument. The Washington Monument is the largest self-standing stone structure in the world, if I read that correct. It's made out of marble and granite. There also is some blue gneiss, which is the oldest metamorphic rock known to mankind. I believe some gneiss dates up to, I'm gonna have to check my facts on that, but over like 1 billion years old due to old Earth theory. But that's digressing there. If we turn to the Lincoln Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial is made completely of marble. Marble is a metamorphic rock. The marble for the actual structure came from Colorado. And inside the Lincoln Memorial, if anyone has a penny in their pocket, you can pull that penny out and take a look at the back of the penny. If it's newer than 1973, I believe, that's when they changed from having the wheat on the back of the pennies to the Lincoln Memorial, and you can see that even on the back of the penny, they show inside the Lincoln Memorial, there's a statue of Lincoln. So we're going to walk up and take a look at the Lincoln Memorial today. Is there anyone in the room as I'm walking here who has actually been to Washington, D.C. before? Raise your hand if you have. Mr. Jungers, did anyone raise their hand?
Just Braden Anderson.
Okay, so we have one, okay? I was in your guys' seats. I've only been to Washington, D.C. one other time. I was 17 years old, and I got to come here for a leadership camp through FFA called Washington Leadership, Washington Leadership Conference. And so it was at D.C., at that conference where I decided I wanted my life's work to be a teacher. My teacher at the time was Mr. Myron Schock. He taught at Lyons for 34 years, and I just saw what a cool impact he had on students, the neat things that they did. And it really inspired me to want to be a teacher. So it's kind of neat to be back in DC 22 years later, sharing this with you guys and getting to see things that I remember as a 17-year-old. But that was my first plane ride. That was my first commercial plane ride when I was 17 years old. And I know a lot of you guys are in that same situation as me. All right, so a little background on Lincoln. I looked up some information and wrote this down so I wouldn't forget. He took office in March 4th, 1861. He was assassinated in April 14th, 1865. He was only 42 days into his second term when he was assassinated. Does anyone raise your hand if you know the name of the person who assassinated him? All right, call on someone, Mr. Jungers, and see if they're correct.
Sierra?
No.
I can't hear real well. Were they correct?
Does anyone have an idea?
Does anyone know?
Swanson didn't raise his hand.
Brayden is
Well,
raising his hand.
I couldn't hear real well, but hopefully John Wilkes Booth was the name that came up. Okay, he assassinated Lincoln while he was at the theater, and Lincoln has been known as one of our best, if not the best, president. So as you can see, the steps I'm coming up here, the marble steps, these were all mined out of Colorado. The marble that the statue's made of, that came from Georgia. Now, this is a metamorphic rock. Do any of you know what Nebraska's state capital is made out of? Raise your hand if you think you know.
Okay,
Take a couple guesses there, Mr. Jungers.
a little louder, Tate.
Limestone.
Limestone.
All right, really, really, really close. I believe, now, you guys can prove me wrong on this because I'm going based on memory. I believe it actually was sandstone, okay? I will double check that because Mr. Timm has gotten things wrong from time to time. But they had to mine that. They originally started quarrying it out in Nebraska. They wanted something that was a native Nebraska rock. And the rocks in Nebraska are all sedimentary rocks. They're rocks that have been compressed over long periods of time, starting out as sand, silt, and clay, and eventually through the lithification process became hardened. Well, the problem with Nebraska sedimentary rock, that sandstone, is that it was too erosive. It would break down over time. So they actually had to go out of state in Nebraska to be able to obtain the stone that they needed. I believe they went down into Missouri, if I recall correctly, to form the capital that we have now. That's part of your assignment. I want you to go look that up on the internet and prove me wrong if it wasn't sandstone. I know it was a sedimentary rock, but all of a sudden I'm second guessing myself on spur of the moment. So you guys look that up and you teach me, okay? So here you guys can see there's Lincoln. And by comparison, I'm gonna flip the camera around for size because it's kind of difficult to get a comparison for how big this statue is. So I'm gonna back up to it as far as the nice security guards will allow me to. You guys can see that this statue is pretty massive. It's probably one of Washington, D.C.'s most well-known monuments. And I have lots of people staring at me right now, but you can't see them because all you can see is my face and the statue. I'm going to get out of their way. They want to take some photos. But then when you come over to one of the sides, I'm going to flip the screen. You can see it says, fellow countrymen, at this second appearing to take the oath of the presidential office, there is a less occasion for an extended address than there was at the first. Then a statement somewhat in detail of a course to be pursued seems fitting and proper. Now, at the expiration of 4 years during which public declarations have been constantly called forth on every point and phase of that great contest which still absorbs the attention and engrosses the energies of the nation, little that is now could be presented. The progress of our arms, upon which all else chiefly depends, is as well known to the public as to myself, and it is, I trust, reasonably satisfactory and encouraging to all. With high hope for the future, no prediction in regard to it is ventured. Now, I'm not going to go and read the whole thing, but can someone give me a guess as to what has been etched up on the wall here and the significance of what it is and what it says? Are there any guesses?
Anyone?
What do you think, Mr. Jungers?
I'm not sure. I've never been there myself.
Well, quite honestly, oh, that is a great guess. And you guys know that's his most famous speech, right? It is not the Gettysburg Address. Actually, if we go to the opposite side of the monument, you'll find that etched on the other side. I haven't researched this because, like I said, I planned this lesson in the airport in St. Louis last night. But to me, that sounds like his second inaugural address as he was being brought into the presidency for his second term. And some of the things that he's referring to into that speech sounds like, to me, him referring back to the Civil War and the struggle that they had experienced during those 4 terms of his presidency. Yet again, another opportunity to prove Mr. Timm wrong. Look that up on the internet and tell me what is inscribed on the 2 walls to the left and to the right of Washington, excuse me, of Lincoln and his monument here. I'm going to give you guys a few off the steps towards the Washington Monument. How are you today, sir? Would you like to say hi to a bunch of school children in Nebraska?
Sure. I'm actually from Western Canada, so we're a
Western
little ways
Canada.
from home.
You're farther than me.
And I'll tell you, what you guys have here is so special. I hope you appreciate the heritage you have, the beauty of this city. We have nothing like this in Canada. Canada is so much younger than your country, has so little history in comparison. This is amazing to be here.
Well, we love our northern neighbors, so thank you very much for talking to my
Oh,
students
you bet.
today.
I wish you well.
Awesome, thank you. All right, guys, I'm going to come down the steps here. And now I think would be a great opportunity just for some questions. So if you guys want to raise your hands, Mr. Jungers can call on you one at a time. I'd say I'll give you about 5-6 minutes to maybe ask some questions. They can be related to Washington, D.C., the monument, what I'm doing here, whatever, as long as they're school-appropriate questions. So are there any questions? Raise your hands.
Richard, you have a question?
I'm going to move somewhere where I can hear the audio a little bit because the speaker on my iPhone is not real loud amongst all the people here.
He'd like a question, right? Somebody
Are we getting anyone with any questions, Mr. Jungers?
No, they all are shy.
All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to thump the bushes here a little bit. Everyone needs to open up their notebooks right now and write 2 questions you would like to ask about Washington, D.C. Yeah, everyone has to do it, even government. All right? Open up your notebooks. If you don't have a notebook, you got to come up with 2 questions because I'm going to tell Mr. Jungers to randomly select people that I know are in the room because I have all your names memorized. You have 45 seconds to come up with 2 questions about Washington, D.C. Go. You're on the clock.
What's a question? Hey, Greg, try to quiet down a little bit so we can ask some questions.
I think that
Do I hear Deb Anderson in the room?
Yep, Deb Anderson's in the room.
Hi, Deb.
we should do the annual 8th grade trip.
Heck yeah.
8th grade. Have that experience all through high school that they just had.
Gilmore Girls, great program.
So, Mr. Timm,
Yes.
we did research and we went to Springfield, and when he was elected, he was, a senator for Menard County in Springfield, Illinois, and he surveyed the land of my great-great-grandparents. So we went to the courthouse to find the paperwork.
Oh, too cool.
Yeah, and they were there. So if you ever want to do a fun field trip, Springfield is amazing.
Oh, I would love that. That'd be fantastic. My wife's stepdad is from Central Illinois, so. All right, it has been about 60 seconds, and there should be some questions in there. So I'm just going to randomly select some names. Aubrey Anderson. Mr. Jungers, did you have Aubrey Anderson stand? And I would actually like Aubrey to come over to the camera so that we can see Aubrey's smiling face. And while I'm talking, I'm actually walking away from the Lincoln Monument so you guys can get a feel for the distance. I'm walking towards the Washington Monument. In between is the World War II Memorial. Aubrey Anderson, are you there?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Okay, so pick one of your questions to ask me. I'm not guaranteeing I have an answer. Most of these I probably won't. But what are you curious about?
Why is there water there?
That is a great question. Why is there water there? Okay, you can go ahead and have a seat. Great question. In fact, I was trying to figure out how to screen share with my phone. I've used this app Zoom a lot on my computer, but this is my first time I've ever used my phone in doing Zoom. I wanted to share with you on the way here, I found evidence of water. We're in a floodplain, okay? Now, what exactly that means is that we're at such a low elevation that should waters move into here, okay, it's really hard to get them removed. Now, the water in the reflecting pool, we as humans purposely put this here, okay? This is just like you would put water in a pool in your backyard, although this isn't chlorinated, and hence the beautiful green algae that you see. And the ducks help add to that algae by adding poop into the water, which the algae and the other little swimmies love to eat. But this reflecting pool has actually been designed and placed here. Part of your assignment that you guys are going to do in Google Classroom is to explore the hydrology of Washington, D.C., how it got to be the way it is today, what it used to be like, and what the geography and the topography appear like, because there's been some significant challenges in trying to keep this capital from being flooded many, many times over. Good question. All right, let's pick another one. I'm gonna go to the back of the room, kind of to the right. Mr. Harden, would you come up and ask your question? What's that? I totally didn't hear what you just said. Mr. Harden, are you there?
Yeah. Come over here.
Okay, come on up. All right, what question do you got?
Oh, you're gonna see Donald Trump.
Am I gonna see? Great question. Okay, so DC is interesting, guys. It's interesting from the standpoint that unlike other cities, everything is really fairly close together. So if I were to go to New York City, things are really spread out. DC, everything is really packed in, but for walking, it's still quite a distance. I'm sweating right now. So this morning I walked probably about 1.5 miles. Got some breakfast and kind of meandered my way past the White House, and his helicopter was sitting out front of the White House. And so there was all sorts of security and stuff taking place. Well, I checked my news feed after I got to the Lincoln Memorial and got a breather. And he was departing for somewhere really important today. So there was added security on top of the usual security that the White House has. But I got a chance to actually see the helicopter take off. So I did not see Donald Trump himself. I had to go to Fox News to check that out. But he is likely not in DC anymore if he was departing for somewhere. Good question. Next question. Let's go to the government class. Sammy's in there, isn't she?
No, they left.
Sammy?
Left.
Sammy's not in there?
They left.
Government
All right,
class left.
let's go with is Bobby in there?
No.
Only
How about Devin Heggie?
Only eighth grade.
Only the 8th grader in here.
Oh, the government took off.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Colton Miller. We don't want to see my shiny head. Let's go back to the monument here. All right, what's your question, Colton?
How tall is the Washington Monument?
Oh, you're gonna have to speak real loud. I got this tiny little phone speaker. I can't hear real well.
How tall is the Washington Monument?
How tall is the Washington Monument? Good question. Hang on. I had that pulled up because I was reading a little bit about it. The Washington Monument is 554 feet, 7 and 11 and 32 seconds inches tall. According to the U.S. National Geologic Survey, let's see, there's a couple other details here. It is the tallest monument column in the world if all are measured above their pedestrian entrances. It was the tallest structure in the world from 1884 to 1889 when it was overtaken by, the French took us, the Eiffel Tower. Okay, good question. I think we have time for one more question. We'll go over to that same corner that Colton was in. Frank, why don't you come on up? While we're waiting for Frank to come up, you can say hi to the ducks. Hi, ducks.
Hi, Doc.
Hi, Mr. Ducky Dog.
How did they transport the stone or marble to build the monument?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. How did they transport the stone and the marble to be able to build the monuments? Honestly, I don't have a lot of good knowledge on that. That's something that you guys are going to have to research on your own. Fortunately, you got Google at your fingertips. So I would like you to tell me that one, Frank, when I get back, okay? All right. If you didn't get a chance to answer, to have me hear your questions, you guys can go ahead and either email them to me or you can just share them with me when you get back. Now, I want to give you guys just a little bit of time because I have given you a pretty sizable, but what I think is a fun assignment, okay? You guys have spent a considerable amount of time, maybe about a week or more, learning how to use ArcGIS, that mapping program. I want you guys to use Google Earth, similar to ArcGIS, okay, to do some actual exploring on your computers of the geography of Washington, D.C., and specifically not just the lay of the land and the East Coast. You're going to be exploring some things about the surrounding states and the shoreline. You're going to be measuring distances of the continental slope and where it goes off into the continental or the continental shelf and where it goes off into the continental slope into the ocean. Maps are really powerful tools, and I want you guys to try to explore the hydrology of Washington, D.C. with the questions that I've given you, and make some comparisons to the challenges that they face here with trying to avoid flooding and the flooding challenges that we've been experiencing back home. That flood back in the spring was really nasty. I just went down the Logan Creek with 3 of my research students, and we could see where the water levels were where they were at and all the erosion that took place. And we've been able to avoid a lot of the problems that other places are experiencing right now. And all those places that are experiencing those problems are in floodplains, just like Washington, D.C. So I want you guys to go to Google Classroom after I discontinue this Zoom, get on the Wi-Fi, pull up Google Earth, and I want you to complete, there's probably about 34, 35 questions. Some of them involve taking screenshots. A lot of them involve using Google Earth. But I want you to be looking at what are the similarities and differences between how the land lays here, the floodplain, and then how does that compare to back home there at Decatur, Nebraska on the Missouri River as well as the Logan Creek floodplain that exists on the west side of Lyons, Nebraska. So let me look here. I want to make sure I have not forgotten anything else. All right. One other thing I want to show you real quick, and this is kind of a personal thing, but this is the World War II memorial. My grandfather was a Marine, and he fought at the Battle of Iwo Jima, which was in the South Pacific. And the story behind that battle was that basically 3 ships of men showed up to fight that battle, and 1 ship left with men, which if you guys think of the ratio, you know, about 2 out of 3 men that showed up at that battle lost their lives fighting in that war. And so this is kind of a personal one for me. My grandfather, Hollis Gustafson, he was 100% Swede. His family originated from Oakland, Nebraska, and he was actually born in a sod house in eastern Colorado. But when he was old enough and the war came about, he enlisted in the war in the Marines and fought in that battle, and he lost part of his leg. Eventually, due to shrapnel that had blown into his leg, they had to amputate that leg. And his whole life, he did his work on crutches. He went to courthouses in the eastern half of Nebraska. He was a consultant on changes in law in the Nebraska legislature, and how that affected the courthouses and how they taxed things and different things. And this was long before handicap accessible parking spaces and things existed. And if you guys know Burke County Courthouse or any other courthouses, most of those courthouses in Nebraska were built prior to handicap accessibility. So my grandpa would load up in a car at like 4 in the morning and drive to places like Central City, drive to places like Aurora, Nebraska, or drive up to Valentine, Nebraska, and he'd park his vehicle so he could get a close parking spot and make his way into the courthouse and do his business. So all I remember of my grandfather, because he died when I was 5 years old, was he loved to make origami frogs and children's toys for kids, and that he loved to put me on his one good knee and bounce me up and down. And so, you know, for a man who lived through all that and all the men that lost their lives in that World War II, it's kind of neat to see this memorial. And anytime you get a chance to travel to your nation's capital, remembering the lives of the men and the women that were laid down so that we can enjoy the freedoms that we have and enjoy the natural resources that we have, clean water, that's just something important for us to always remember. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. I wanted to share this experience with you guys, and I'm super thrilled, Mr. Jungers and Ms. Anderson and whoever else is left there in the room. Mr. Swanson, Mr. Loftis, thank you very much for helping out with making this possible. So I'm going to let you guys go so you can work on your homework. See you guys.
Bye.
Oh, B.